Now, does anybody else just sit around on the internet for hours at a time and just research history just for the fun of it? Please tell me I'm not the only one, because I love doing that. I love studying history, reading about history, and history sometimes plays out better than any TV show out there. Also, most TV shows most times these days kind of suck, so I don't even really watch them. So, but yeah, like, does anybody else just like love just going down this rabbit hole of the internet where you just research history ad nauseum? Because I do, and one of the people that inspired me to do that is actually Graham Hancock, with the gentleman that you see on the screen here, because he went on the Joe Rogan Experience years and years ago, and he said, like, these pyramids, like, they could have been built by an ancient empire from 12 or 20,000 years ago, and these people could have existed, and then their entire existence could have been lost. And the reason is because, well, just look at the map of the last ice age. You had like rivers flowing in completely different directions. You had like areas today that are on the coast were miles and miles inland compared to what they used to be. There were land bridges everywhere. The natives themselves like walked across one of these land bridges and allegedly got stuck here on the continents, which is one of these theories that we'll see like that could be challenged here as to whether or not they did or did not have communications with actual with other cultures during that time. And the world just completely different 15,000 years ago. And as the waters would have rose, and the climates would have changed, some of these civilizations and empires that would have like been cross continent and going across the oceans might have collapsed, and their history might have been lost to us. And we've had several events like this, even in recent history, or relatively recent history. Like, just look at the last 3,000-4,000 years of human history. Not even 12, right? Like, that's 3 times is further away. But look at the last 4,000 years. There have been several major systemic collapses in human civilization, or complete reorientations of the working order. For example, like the collapse of Rome, and then the Dark Ages that followed thereafter, where it wasn't necessarily that like they were dark because like technology stopped advancing. It was because like people stopped keeping track of good records. Or like the Bronze Age collapse or things of that nature. So it's always interesting and fascinating to question history and look back that far into the record. And one of the gentlemen that has helped me to kind of question history and kind of always like look at it with a lens of skepticism is Graham Hancock.
Everybody's heard about the Aztecs. Everybody's heard about the Maya. But before the Aztecs and before the Maya, there were a culture who are referred to as the Olmecs. Again, we don't know what they called themselves. That's what the Aztecs called them. They called them the Olmecs, and it means the rubber people because that rubber producing area of Mexico. They worked in giant megalithic constructions. What they're most famous for is these huge carved human heads, which can be on a scale of up to 20 to 25 tons in weight, and which have curious features which have been interpreted variously as Polynesian, African, don't look like classic Native American features.
They're a fun.
Yeah, that's always interesting because like we don't know, like said, like the history of the North and South American continent. I mean, it's just like said, it's it's just fascinating. There's features all across both continents that make people go like, whoa. Like, people are really much more advanced than we give them credit to. I think that there's this sort of ego that's associated with history that I kind of noticed the more I research it, particularly in the modern day, where we assume that like we're just the smartest people that ever walked the earth because we have all this technology. But I just think it's like, look, we had smart people like for thousands and tens of thousands of years. The only difference is like, we kind of broke a certain barrier where we had enough relative stability in the world to develop like a further more advanced technologies, or maybe we just like hit those surpass those barriers quicker. But there's no reason to assume why the Romans or the Chinese or like these other civilizations that have existed in antiquity couldn't have industrialized, right? And one of the reasons they did industrialize, of course, is like popularly explained, is because of the exploitation of labor. Why would you need to like worry about like building tools and trinkets and like managing energy resources when you can just enslave people in mass like the Spanish used to? Which brings me to my next clip here of Thomas Sowell discussing the Spanish.
are two fundamentally different explanations in income and wealth. And one is that this is caused by external factors, discrimination, exploitation, versus, for example, human capital. In the history of conquest, Spain simply transferred vast amounts of wealth, largely in the form of gold and silver, from the Western Hemisphere to itself. As a result of these transfers, the amount of silver in Europe tripled, causing inflation across the continent. Spaniards also took out gold by the ton, except for that was intercepted by British pirates on the high seas. But in the end, Spain, when the gold and silver ran out and the Indians died off working in the mines, Spain was left as one of the poorest countries in Western Europe. And so we cannot explain the present conditions of all the various groups and countries just by the evils that they have done in the past, or even the cases where they have in fact transferred income and wealth.
That's an interesting point, especially about Spain, because my takeaway from that whole exchange is the Spanish really were like the most, some of the most brutal oppressors on the continent. And they really exploited people to the max. I mean, they were just some of the biggest exploiters out there. In all that exploitation, and this is one of the things, it's easy to exploit, but it's harder to think of ways to find in which everybody benefits. And this is why win-win situations are like very, very important. It's like especially like in the basis of capitalism. If I can make a product that helps you, and I can sell that product, and I get a benefit out of that, and you get a benefit out of that, then we both win, right? Spanish mercantilism and Spanish like empire was managed by just brutal autocracies and class hierarchies. And as a result, they created this very rigid structure, this very inflexible structure. And when situations happen, when economic crises happen or other things happen, or where they lost the war or whatever it may have been, the empire just kept getting smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller, and the control kept getting less and less and less, to a point where now in the modern day we look at Spain and be like, who? Like they were the most relevant empire, like 300 years ago, to a point now where it's like Spain is not even like really all that relevant even in European politics. I mean, it's kind of incredible the degree to which like the Spanish Empire has just like lost a lot of its influence and a lot of its power, first in geopolitics and global politics. But it's kind of also interesting to see like maybe in like overall cultural factors as well, because a lot of the Spanish, even like when you like living in the continents here, like in North America or South America, a lot of culture seems like it comes out of Colombia and Mexico, and less so Spain, which is the original continent, which is not the case with like English and British culture. It's like British culture has still a huge influence on us. But I don't know, I can't really speak too much to the culture side of things. This is just what I've seen through my perspective. But yeah, it's kind of interesting. The Spanish, like I said, like they built an empire and they just like threw it all away.
Pakistan. Another sphinx can also be found, clearly of a similar antiquity, supporting the suspicion claimed many times on our channel that a civilization which far preceded the ancient Egyptians actually built these amazing pyramids.
And that is one of Graham Hancock's like big things, is like we could have had an ancient sprawling civilization back in the days, like 10, 20,000 years ago. And again, like I said, like the world looked completely different back then. So it's not unreasonable to think that a lot of their artifacts and a lot of their information was lost over 12,000 years. I mean, I've been to ghost towns in Montana that have like, there's like, they were built like at the turn of the century, and there's like two planks of wood left, like to show like that thousands of people used to live there at one point in time. I mean, there's one town, like I think it was called Silverton. It's like north of Phillipsburg. You go up there, there's like a couple of houses left, and there's like one collapsed like brick building, and you're like, and then it shows you like on the placard it says 7,000 people used to live here. And you're like, in what? In like 3 houses? Like, whew, insane.
Known as the Sphinx of Baluchistan, many funded academics have strongly denied the possibility of this familiar-looking formation being of man-made origin, and many attempt to claim that its familiar shape, along with the surrounding environment's artificial appearance, is mere coincidental, and that the entire area is just a natural formation. These conclusions, made with no official archaeological investigations ever being undertaken at the site. Thankfully, however, an equal number of individuals who have actually visited this site, most self-funded, have actually concluded the complete opposite.
I would like to see more data information on that. But yeah, that is really cool, by the way. Just like, I mean, there's just something alluring, isn't there? Like about the thought of there being like an ancient civilization that's lost to history. It almost sounds romantic, doesn't it? Like that there was this advanced civilization and it like was intercontinental, similar, and it might not have been as advanced as we are. Like obviously, like we have like things that we're gonna leave. This civilization is gonna leave. They're gonna be out there for millions of years. So no archaeologist is gonna lose sleep over like wondering whether or not we existed, because we're gonna leave a lot of plastics behind that are not gonna biodegrade should anything happen to humanity. But it is kind of interesting to see, like, to think that there might have been an ancient seafaring civilization at the same level of development as, let's say, like the Europeans before the Renaissance or around that time, who would have had like, these ships and like these trade routes and all this, like capable of just crossing the oceans, which actually doesn't. Turns out you don't need a whole lot to cross the ocean. Look at one of my videos talking about Pythias. That guy just literally just went up across France towards the English Isles and just sailed all the way to Iceland, which I didn't even know. I thought the Vikings were the first to discover Iceland. No, it was some dude like from 325 BC, in like from an ancient Greek colony on the coast of France. So like history again is just like full of these little places where you can like hide stuff. And the further back you go, the more stuff you can hide into history that we don't know about and we're waiting to discover. So anyway, I hope everybody enjoyed this video. This is really interesting. I really love just like discussing history and talking about facts. And let me know on this channel if you'd like me to do a little bit more videos, researching more into history. Or also if you like my science videos, talking about space. And I like both of those actually. I like talking about space and the unknown out there, but also the stuff here on Earth. Like everything is just purely interesting and a curiosity to me. So anyway, thank you for making it this far in the video. I appreciate your time. Talk to you later.